Good morning and welcome to Morning Coffee with Brigid. I'm Brigid Burke, and yeah, it's a bit dark in here. I'm just trying to see if I can adjust the light so you can see me a little better. Oh, and I just got a notification about my own live. I think I finally liked myself on my other channel, so. And hello, Alex. We are just sort of chatting, yes. And good morning, Melissa. Yes, I'm back today after yesterday. Yesterday I woke up with another brutal headache, and I was just like, no, I needed to save my energy because I had to get final exams graded for my mythology students and my religion students in the morning. And I knew I was going to get the whole run of people who were going to be like, Professor, my computer exploded on the morning I was supposed to get the exam in, and da-da-da. And yeah, there was the run of those. So, sometimes you need a break. Well, that's it. Glad I took the morning for yourself. Yeah, well, I took it, basically I just had to spend it, let me move my camera down a little bit. I had to spend it kind of, I had to kind of work my way into, trying to feel good enough to be able to sit down. I think it was probably almost 10:30 by the time I felt good enough to sit and work on exams. And fortunately, I got them done by like 1:30, so that was pretty good. Generally, I know what answers I'm looking for, even when I'm reading like essays. So I'm like, bing, bing, bing. If you hit these points, then you're going to get the grade. If you've missed something, then I'm generally fairly lenient though. And the people who missed it, or I didn't do the time it right, it closed before I got done, blah, blah, blah. Then I just said, all right, well, I didn't realize this was the time. I'm like, well, you had a week to do it, I don't know. Anyway, I'm not going to complain about that. This happens every single semester, and I'm not exactly always the best person when it comes to timeliness of things anymore. Used to be. I feel like I've changed a lot with that, but I don't know, life changes, and then, you're not on the same schedule that you were on previously. So, in any case, it just kind of is what it is. But in any case, yeah, by the time I had also went out last night with some friends, and it's funny because we were in Madison, which the town of Madison, and we were after we had dinner, we went outside, and of course it's winter time, right? It's about to be, well, if you're in the northern hemisphere, it's about to become the shortest day of the year. That will be tomorrow, because we are coming upon solstice. Today's the 20th already. It's hard to believe, but we have this. This is the this kind of the shortest day of the year. And so we were out, it was dark, and I remember my friend's husband looks up, and we were looking at something, and I pointed up, and again, the drones or whatever they are, there's right there, and he goes, well, isn't that a plane? And I pointed, because there was actually a plane kind of landing. I said, that's a plane over there. And he's like, oh yeah, they're not the same thing. He's like, what the hell is that thing? It was kind of interesting, and then there were like three of them, and they were all crisscrossing each other. He's like, and we're all standing there looking at this. So like, but see, now officially, it's funny. All the comedians have picked it up now, and we're all victims of mass hysteria, and we're all laughable and stupid, right? Because we, haha, these people think that this is happening, which is, a real convenient non-answer, gaslighting non-answer to the whole thing. Again, I'm not worried about it. I don't think we're being invaded or anything terrible is happening, but it's interesting, right? Because then the response switched to, oh no, everything's authorized. We know what all the drones are and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no, you don't. I mean, you literally had people reporting these things, and they're all over airspace that you already said they're not supposed to be over. So anyway, that was just an interesting little side note from last night, because we were, because I just happened to notice them when I came out from dinner. I'm like, yep, they're still there. So in any case, today it was interesting. I went to bed last night because I just wanted to get to bed early after I got back. I think I got home like a little after 8, and I was like, and I'm getting to be an old person, so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go to sleep at like 8 o'clock. Either that or back to being like an infant again. You have your bedtime. But I went and I got some sleep, and so I woke up around 4:30 to 5 this morning, and I finally got up. So this is actually coffee number 3, okay? I don't normally drink this much coffee in the morning, but I was like, well, it is, and good morning, Suda. This is peppermint bark coffee. peppermint bark flavored coffee. Yeah, and it's quite good. So, yeah, so in any case, yesterday it was, like I said, it ended up just being a day where I mainly got grading and stuff done. And I do have some packages and stuff that I had to get out too, because I made some eBay sales and stuff. And so I'm back today, and it's very cloudy. I'm just looking at the little sliver of light on the horizon, and it's just kind of, oh, good morning, wow, yum. Yeah, it's the time of year. I actually somehow ended up with like 6 boxes of this coffee, so I'm like, that's fine with me. It'll last me through January. It's like a nice winter coffee. Like spicy coffees, or even like mint, like if you think about peppermint, like, associated with, candy canes and stuff like that, right? It's that kind of a thing. So I don't know. That's probably why I like it so much. That's like my one. I don't really eat a lot of sweets, although this is the year where everybody's giving each other cookies, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm giving that's what I've done every year, because when you have a lot of people around you who are friends, I used to love peppermint coffee. Yeah, it's this is what Suda's saying. Yeah, it's I don't know. It's the one kind of treat that I have, because it literally, if you go to Starbucks and get like a peppermint mocha, and a cookie exchange, tons of them. And I do that all the time, because even when I had a full-time job, when you have a lot of people around you who you socialize with, if you buy gifts for each and every one of those people, you start getting into the hundreds of dollars for people. And then certain people too, it's like, especially if I feel like people are not in a certain financial place or whatever, I don't want people to feel like, oh, okay, well now I've got to buy you an expensive gift in return. Like, I've tried to stay out of that and just stick to, let's just bake cookies and, maybe just have like a little token or something. Sometimes like I'll get people like $10 Dunkin' Donuts card or something if I know that that's what they drink, or, whatever. Just something small, because I just don't want it to be, I mean, occasionally there are some people who I will send more to, just, because, just because I want to, or maybe I don't get to see them as much. But generally speaking, I just try to keep it to that. And I think everybody's kind of happy with that, because then it's like, yeah, now I don't feel like I have to go out and find a gift for you and buy it. You know what I mean? Unless, sometimes people see something they really want to get for me. So, anyway, blah, blah, Christmas stuff, and everybody's kind of running late. Like, my friend gave me my gift last night, and she's like, your card's in there too, I haven't had time to mail anything. So, yeah, and I'm still in the offloading process. I'm getting rid of, I have all these DVDs and CDs that I was going to get rid of, and I brought the bag of them to dinner. I told her, I'm like, all right, because she's an absolute movie buff. So I said, okay, go through these and see, because some of them are even still in the shrink wrap. I never even opened the DVD. And I'm like, if I haven't opened this in 10 years, I don't need it. So she went through them, and she took most of it. She was like, wow, you really want to give these away? I was like, I can't take it with me. So, we're making slow progress now. Slower than before, but towards my goal of emptying out. Now, interestingly, okay, the topic that came up for me today, because you know me, if I'm up this early, I'm doing my guide meditations and so forth, and I said, okay, well, what should I talk about this morning with all of our friends on the live stream? And basically, it was interesting. What came up was, I had posted a picture this morning, like a cartoon, of the person like seeing object online, going, this object would make me happy. And so they order said object, mailman comes and says, here you go, here's the object. And then they take the object out, new object, and then it just becomes object, right? And I don't know why I felt kind of prompted to do this, but I made a comment. I said, well, yeah, that's kind of how we feel about, this is how we can feel about stuff, especially talking about gifts and stuff, where if you go back to, and I know we've mentioned this before, but like when you're a kid, and again, there's the excitement of being a kid. I'm not taking away from that. But there is kind of the thing of, oh, there's like when I was growing up, if there was the doll that I wanted on Christmas or whatever, and then I got it, I would play with that doll to death for like a week, and then after that it was like, okay, like it wasn't as interesting anymore, because the allure of it wears off once you have it. And I said, that's, and immediately thought of Colander, pouring stuff in and it runs right out. Interesting. Yeah, that's actually an interesting metaphor there. and kind of a good one, yeah. Like the idea that, yeah, you've got it, but like the water flows out, right? I mean, that the feeling about it flows out. Materialism is the worst part of Christmas, is what Melissa's saying. Yeah, well, yes, and that's the thing. It's so. I mean, it's nice for everything to be really festive and everything, but when everything is ramped up around just getting stuff, I mean, the idea of, giving and sharing is a great thing. The idea of just like an accumulation of expensive stuff is, yeah, that's the capitalistic part of Christmas, isn't it? This is what keeps the stores in business and so forth. To a certain degree, I mean, we all kind of do that, right? Like, that's the time of year where we have, like, our product sales. And I mean, I do that, too. Like, it's like I'm saying, okay, hey, my gift cards are on sale for this and that. Like, you could buy somebody a reading, But, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it, but it tends to be very, very excessive, and it tends to be very stuff-driven, especially for kids. And it's almost like, and then it becomes tied to behavior, too. Like, are you good or bad? And, and even if you're bad, you're still going to get, like, the Xbox or whatever the heck it is. I mean, you know what I mean? It doesn't usually change anything. Very rarely does it do that. At least not in America. I don't know about other places. It could be different. But actually, maybe I should rephrase. It's the expectations of giving and receiving. But no. But I think you were right both ways. I mean, materialism is, yeah, and I'm not. By the way, that's not like, I hope that wasn't a critique, obviously, of that. It was just like, yeah, I mean, this is the time of year when people are buying stuff, and if you have a business, this is the time when people are going to be looking for things. But it gets excessive. It gets like okay, like somebody like my mom who feels like, even though she has like no money, she has to spend $100 on each person, and we're like, no, you don't. You just get a little thing, just like one thing, and that should be fine. Alex says it can also make the giver feel less if they can't give or can't bake or whatever. Like lots about worth is what comes up. Yes. Well, right. Exactly. Like my nephews always give big gifts, but my nephews make big bucks. One of them, works for Chevron. I mean, he basically manages like the gas pipelines for all of Southern California. And the other is him and his wife are police officers, Los Angeles Sheriff's Department police officers, and so they are not they're doing well on that count. So so they will do that, and so yeah, that's kind of my point. Like if I feel like if I can't give them something more than something that's worth maybe $25, then I feel like I'm being cheap. But I'm like, well, I'm not really being cheap, and they're like, no, we don't care. Like the acknowledgement's all we care about. Like that's it. Like you're just acknowledging each other, and that's fine. It doesn't have to be a big thing for them. They want to do that, but yes, it can make you give you an awareness of like, maybe I can't. But I don't know. I mean, there's something nice about receiving too, because then sometimes when people want to share, but then. But yeah, I think a lot of this is around value. So that's a lot of second house stuff. It's around value. What has value for you, and what does value mean? And I found myself, and I don't know why this is on my mind a lot recently, but I also think about relationships. Maybe because we've had this 12/12 portal, and there's stuff going on. But when I think about relationships, like I messaged somebody the other night who I was talking to, and I forget why it came up. It started with Latin and Latin mottos, I think, but it kind of, because the motto that I had mentioned to this person, they had said, I asked them, they said they had taken Latin like ages ago and they hated it, and I was like, well, can you translate this without Google Translate? And translation was actually pretty close, pretty decent. He's like, I don't remember exactly. So, but it had to be the phrase that's over Carl Jung's house, which is vocatus et non vocatus Deus aderet, which in Latin means whether called and not called, but really called or not called, God is present. That's literally what that means, and it's connected to a lot of his journey. Carl Jung referred to his soul as Philemon, which is actually a word for like love and affection. Like that's a Greek word for love and affection. And the story of Baucis and Philemon is supposed to be about what a real authentic value and real authentic love. And I know I've talked about that story here before. But it was interesting because I've seen that recently, and I know I've talked about this here before too, but I was mentioning this person. I said, Patty Boyd had released her biography, and she's like 80 and she still looks fabulous, but she was this really, really like gorgeous. I mean, George Harrison writing love songs to her. Eric Clapton, like absolutely obsessed with her, writing the whole Layla thing, right? And yet she married and divorced both of them. And there was a comment that she had kind of made about how at some point it's just like she didn't hold their interest somehow. And I'm like, yeah, because she, I mean, again, I'm not gonna, relationships are emotionally complex, but I kind of almost feel like she's the shiny object that they acquired in some way. Like there's an aspect of it of like, we talk about the trophy wife and so forth, right? The one who looks really, really good. But then you see these women and you think, oh, that woman she's so beautiful. She's this, she's that. She's going to be in this relationship and this guy's just going to be. But no, it's like once you've been acquired, then a lot of times they go out and you find out that they're having affairs, that they're doing other things. And you think they've got this absolutely drop dead beautiful woman as their wife. Like, why are they doing that? Because they still probably need to feel, well, because they're looking at her more like an object, like, and the feeling around it is just that. And it can also be, I think, again, we've talked about the anima projection and how it works, but that's a really powerful thing of it. It's that fantasy image, and then when you get to know the real person, it's just like, oh, okay, well, it's not as interesting now. And I feel like that almost kind of illustrates it, because and then this is why we talk about it as objectification, because it's like, yeah, and I mean, and women can do it to men too, by the way. It's not necessarily something, they can look at, I've seen that's been a long lesson for me. There's been strings of people I've been involved with who have, certain, I don't know, status or celebrity or whatever. And you're just like, oh yeah, when you get to know them, you're like, yeah, probably was better off not knowing them. But I mean, it's just, yeah, there's the real person, it's kind of like when you have relationships that are all just based on one thing after another. And so it comes down to value, I think, is part of. Alex says, I've been on both sides of that coin. Yeah, and me too. And I don't know. And I think it's the kind of thing that makes us step back from, at least for me, it's made me step back from it for a very, very long time. And I just feel like it's like, yeah, it's a matter of, okay, so when we're talking about stuff, we're talking about what's the real value of things, right? You can take something and you can treasure it. You can get one little thing and you can treasure that thing. One of the things they say about Taurians in particular, and again, I know not everybody, I think I might be the only Taurian who's on today, but there's definitely this idea of when I get something, I think that's part of the reason it's been so hard to throw things away, because I'm just kind of like, well, yes, but even when it's outlived its usefulness, it can transform and have some other usefulness. Like, I feel like stuff is to be used carefully and to be cherished. You know what I mean? That's what it is. It's not just about having a lot of stuff. It's about valuing the stuff you have. And sometimes when you have less of something, you value it more. Okay? And I think, I mean, there's a lot about, I think also with this Pluto and Aquarius, we're kind of moving out of that space where we are so overly concerned with material, with what we'll call capitalistic goals. That's interesting to think about. My seventh house is ruled by Taurus, is what Alex is saying. Yeah, and mine's actually in the Aquarius house. It's in the 11th house. It's right in the 11th house. Between the 10th and 11th, probably in some system, it might be sort of kind of in the 10th too, sort of kind of. And that's interesting too, because then that's where Uranus has been hitting a lot of people too, is where Taurus is right now. But I've got to see where my Taurus is. Yes. Yeah, I can't remember exactly, Suda, but yeah, it will definitely be in the report that I gave you. But Taurus, it's like the second house has to do with value. It has to do with money, but it also has to do with value. And weirdly, I don't know, by synchronicity, there was another Alan Watts video that I saw. And he talks about the fact that money is really a symbol, and he says the block to abundance is not that we don't have enough, it's a psychological block. Because we think that wealth has to do with these symbols of wealth rather than actual wealth. Okay? So, yeah, and we've decided as a society that that's what wealth represents. And one of the things I definitely have been talking about with the new Aquarian age, I've been hearing this from different astrologers, is that there's going to be a shift in terms of how we think about economics. Like, a lot of these aspects are challenging our economic systems and how we do things. And I don't know, maybe this is why the angels are saying, like, yeah, having a multi-million-dollar retirement may not be the big thing. You know, maybe, you know, that's, you know what I mean? It's like that kind of a thing. Like, we all feel like, and we only spend all of our lives saving for that one day, like for retirement and so forth, of like, oh, that's when I'm finally going to be able to relax and enjoy myself. But by the time you get there, then it's like, you know, so true, right? Then we don't, my job has gotten easier somehow, is what you're saying. Well, that's a good thing. I just feel like there's a lot of our life is constructed around that. And his whole thing was like, well, I'll have to post a link to the video on my stories today. But he basically was saying, you know, he talked about, of course, he was talking in the 70s, so I think sometimes he uses phrases and things that maybe are not so kosher or too PC right now. But he was talking about, you know, the man who goes out and just works in the morning and then decides he's going to spend, after he's earned enough money to get him through the day, he wanders around and maybe goes in, you know, maybe smokes some opium somewhere, does this, does that. And people will say, well, he's lazy and irresponsible. And he says, or maybe he just recognized that, you know, okay, I worry about money to make sure I have enough. He says, one of the things I can tell you that as AI is taking the burden off tedious tasks, which is a good thing for that. And he did bring that up too. Watts said, he said, that's what technology is supposed to be for. It's supposed to, it's not only supposed to relieve those burdens, but it's also supposed to help us. It's supposed to help everybody. It's supposed to change the way that we do things. But instead, we've gotten to, it's like, no, I have to acquire more and more and more and more. And that becomes the whole thing. And it becomes our attitude towards people as well. Corporations who see people as a commodity, right? You know, relationships that are made, you know, based on their usefulness, right? I mean, it's you know, and yet if you see the person, one of the things I've learned, that's what I was starting to say, but one of the things I've learned since I've quit my job and I was working, because like I said, I was working full-time as a department director, and then I was also teaching, which I'm still doing remotely. At that time I was also doing some in-person teaching, so I drive from one campus to do different places and then do my regular job and then, you know, go do other things. And it always felt like no matter how much I made, it was never enough. When I walked away from all of it, let me tell you, a Taurus saying, okay, I'm walking away from a steady income and I'm just going to have to try to figure it out from here. That is like the scariest, that's scarier than any horror movie. Okay. It's just like, oh my God, what am I doing? But literally my guides were all like, no, that's going to lead you to what makes you happy and satisfied. And one of the big things that I learned is that I probably make a third of what I used to make. But it's like, yeah, but you still have a roof over your head. Like you still can make it just doing the thing that you want to do on the schedule that you want to do it. And I'm just finding I'm not worried as much about like, oh, am I going to have all this money when I'm 80 and 90 and whatever. It's going to be what it is. And maybe I will. Like I said, I don't know what will shift between now and then, but to me, I'm just like, it's not, what a powerful realization is what Alex is saying. Yeah, yeah. And cause that's what I said. Now I've gotten to a point where I'm like, okay, this is the way it's going. And this gives me the ability to innovate and create and say, what kind of new things do I want to do? And to be able to get into a space where it's like, all right, well, you know, and some months, believe me, I'm telling you, there are some months where it is a little scary, but you know, it just keeps shifting and changing. But in the meantime, you get to experience more of life. It's not like, well, I'm miserable with this headache today, I got to drag myself out of bed and get to the office. you know. It's just, you know, you can flow. For me, having that flow, not being forced into a certain kind of routine, and Suda says, yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's just, you know, or not having to sit here. I remember during COVID when I had to work from home. I mean, I actually did quite a lot when I worked from home. I mean, I would get on in the morning. I would take care of whatever tasks I had to. I'd leave chat open, and then I'd do other stuff. I was painting. I was writing books. Suda said, I read yesterday, the price of anything is what you exchange for it. Yes, you know, that's something my brother-in-law had always said, because he was he collected records. Right? I mean, other music memorabilia too. But when he started selling it, he said, you know, you can go online and you can look it up on, I don't know, you can look up somewhere to see what people are selling that object for, or what that album for. Now, he says it could be an album that's worth, like, oh, it's very rare and it's worth $700 or something, right? And he said, but the bottom line is it's only worth what people are willing to pay for it. Yeah, and what you exchange for it too. And also, you know, like I used to have this happen before I had the Institute for the Study of Feminine Myth, when I was doing more, I think it was called Scholars of the Borderland before. And when I was doing that kind of classes that were all remote, anybody who would buy one would just they would never get past like the first lesson. They never did anything with it. And I'm like, well, what a waste of money. You know what I mean? Like, wouldn't you want to, I feel that way about college students too, because I feel like, okay, I understand that like maybe what I'm teaching is not in your major, or it's not, I get it. I totally understand. And time is a finite resource, so exchanging that is silly. Well, right, exactly. And interestingly, yeah, a lot of the work that I do is based on, like for me, it's like, okay, people pay for my time. It's just kind of like, okay, this is an hour of my time. This is what it costs. And I try to give you the maximum for that hour, or half hour, or whatever it is, based on what I have. But it's interesting because with this kind of exchange, yeah, when I taught the classes, like with college students, a lot of them, they'll just go through and not bother to do any of the work. They might take an F and then have to take the class over. And I don't know, the university now has some kind of deal on, you know, you can get a flat rate for X number of classes. So they'll just take one as a joke and decide whether they're going to do it or not. And I'm like, that seems to me to be a real waste of your education. But that happens when that becomes commodified as well. It's just about, you know, trying to get the most bang for your buck. And it's like, well, is that what the real value of it is? You know? And actually, yeah, I mean, when it comes, it's interesting that we bring up time as well, because that was one of the things that I was watching Dean Radin the other day. He's the director, I think, of the Institute for Noetic Sciences, which I used to actually be a paying member of that long time ago. But they do a lot of what now is like parapsychological research and stuff, and he's quite good. He's really quite interesting presentation that he gave, and he said. He kind of showed this continuum graph where he talks about what we think of as the mundane versus the profound, right? And this kind of scale of of experience. You know, he had kind of like an XY axis. He had like that kind of a chart. And so kind of at the bottom of that was like normal instinct, intuition, and so forth. And as he went up, it's like, okay, this is the experience of a genius. This is the experience of a yogi. And as he kind of goes up and up in the type of how profound the experience is, he says it's interesting because we believe that, you know, there are yogis who are, or gurus who have great spiritual power. We know and we believe that there are people who are geniuses. But when you get to the bottom part of that axis and you have people who have just everyday intuition experiences, we're less likely, that's more controversial as something that we accept. He said, but when it's on this grand scale, it's more acceptable to us. Oh, Alex, I just saw that pop up. Yes, I did get your email. I apologize. I didn't get it. I don't think I got it. I thought I didn't get a chance to write you back on it, but I do have that. So no worries. I do have it. Sorry, just that popped up on the top of my screen and I saw that. I was like, oops, yep, I did get that. It's just, yeah, that's going to be the next thing I look at once I have final grades done for this class. Then I'm going to start looking at that. So, but anyway, it's just, I thought that was just interesting though, that, Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I've been having post retrograde stuff. Oh yeah, no problem. No, it's fine. I have it. I mean, having it. I'd rather have it 2 times than not at all, right? So that's totally fine. Yeah. So I don't know. I just, and I'm trying to work this in. I'm thinking about this with respect to the other. But what Braden was saying was that we don't tend to accept things. We have trouble dealing with anything that doesn't follow what we think of as being in space time. Even like Jungian psychology, I think, is not accepted because Jung posits a collective that's outside of space and time. You know, we do readings and stuff, and those readings are outside of space and time, right? I mean, we're not. I don't know how to put it. Our readings are, they're kind of in a space, where we think that. Does this really tell us the future or not, or what is this really telling us about where things are going when we talk about predictive stuff? Because we're still kind of talking about it in the realm of time. But if you have an intuition about something that doesn't match, the externals, we don't. That's more controversial. Let's put it that way. So I don't know. I feel like just thinking kind of a lot about human experience and emotion too. Kind of getting back to. The theme of the ISFM for this next semester is going to be masculine-feminine integration. And what does that look like? And by the way, I'm not suggesting I totally know the answer to that. Because even if one person is willing to examine that, or work through that, the other person might not be. And certainly when we're looking at... it's just really interesting. If we're getting back to this concept of love and relationship and what it means to truly be in relationship and not just have it being about, just a cool concept to think about with readings. Yeah, it's, is what Alex is just saying here. Yeah. Shiva Shakti energy. I'm here for it being Suda. Yes, exactly. Well, right. I mean, certainly internally the Shiva Shakti, we know how that works, right? I mean, having that balance. And in fact, I think my image for the next term is going to be a Sri Ardhanarishwara, which is the Shiva Shakti, they're shown as half and half, right? Like that are integrated together. And it's like, how do we bring that together? And I think that's part of the reason I'm thinking, wow, awesome. Yeah, that's why I'm thinking about things around what Jung would have called syzygy, which is also a Gnostic term. It's like this idea of, the marriage of the sun and the moon, the way in which these two opposites, manage to blend together, kind of in this alchemical way, but also in the way that we relate to each other. If we think about just kind of going back to intuition, emotion, all of these very feminine things, which are often the problem in relationships, because oftentimes women who already kind of more naturally, I suppose that's why these things are considered feminine. They tend to be more qualities that women have, which are more around nurturing or companionship or intimacy that's not just about, physical satisfaction, right? Like an intimacy, like real intimacy. And a lot of times men are more focused on it from that physical satisfaction standpoint, which is why they're often considered to be not really in that space. And by the way, that's kind of a stereotype overgeneralization. Obviously, there are men who can be very caring and close, and then there are women maybe who are not. I mean, it's just about the way that these energies are. But certainly, if you're talking about on a collective level, men are told, emotions are kind of being allowed to feel. I think I noticed this with doing Rouhani this year, that as people have the heart opening, it's very hard to maintain that heart opening in this kind of environment. And I think sometimes for people, they feel like, okay, well, I've had this opening and now I don't feel anything, or now I feel like I'm back to where I was, because the mind keeps stepping back in and keeps pulling us back to that same space, which is it takes a lot of time to overcome that. And I think about it too, think about, okay, just the idea that let's just say we have a conversation and I start to cry, right? And then what's the first thing that we do when we start crying? We go, I'm sorry. Why are we apologizing for showing emotion? But that's what we do. It's just kind of like, oh, I've overexpressed my emotion and you're not supposed to see that, right? Oh, you're going to think I'm too melodramatic and hysterical and, and then, but you see what and think of the word hysterical too, back to Aristotle's good old hysterios, your uterus is detached and moved somewhere else in your body. It's interesting. And so when you have men who want to embrace their feminine side or want to make that connection, it feels weird to them. I remembered, well, I hate to bring up Dilbert, but it was a Dilbert cartoon where Dilbert decided he was going to join a man's group and do manly things, and they were drinking, they were doing drumming and drinking like ginger snap tea, and he's just like, okay, this isn't quite what I had in mind. It's like those old Robert Bly groups that he had about men trying to get in touch with their feelings. But to a lot of men, that feels really odd. It's just kind of like, it just, I don't know. It's something that really, I feel like, makes men uneasy because they're not associated with that. And the idea of connecting with a woman in that way, it's almost like, it's funny because when people are dating, they often can do that. But then at some point, there's, I don't know, maybe my marriage experience is not, predictive of everybody else's when I was married. But I just felt that when it came to the mundane day-to-day stuff, that if you wanted to have that kind of communication and engagement, that it wasn't there. Alex says, I think even if it comes natural to a man, it's off-putting, because that's not how they should be, in quote, in inverted commas there in quotes. Yes, that's right. Right. Role models or lack thereof plays a huge part. Totally agree with that. Suda says this. Yeah, that I totally agree with, because, I think, right, because the men in their lives are teaching them that this is the way things need to be. And I think also sometimes when you have like a single mother and so forth, why you will have men who will get, who will take out a lot of their anger towards their own mother because they feel like somehow it's her fault that, that all they have is this woman to be a role model to them. So we often say, yes, they need male role models, but it's like, well, what does that mean exactly though? I mean, because there has to be kind of a breaking out of that cycle. And I don't know quite how that's going to work, but I feel like today's live stream is kind of all over the map, right? But I do think it kind of gets down to this idea, if we're talking about masculine-feminine integration, if we're talking about not seeing people as objects, but as subjects, shall we say, there is a reverse mythology of that, actually. There's the mythology of prayer, well, right? Aphrodite, who... it's one of the myths of her. It's the myth of, well, they call him Pygmalion, but I don't think he actually had a name. Pygmalion and Galatea. Those are the two names. My Fair Lady is actually based on this story. But the idea was that, and it's interesting how My Fair Lady interpreted that idea, by the way. But he's a guy who lives on Cyprus, which is the island sacred to Aphrodite. And while he's there, he doesn't care for the women there. He doesn't feel he can have any connection with the women who are there. So he makes a statue for himself of a woman. And he starts to fall in love with this statue. He starts doing kind of weird things, like giving it flowers and writing poetry to it, blah, blah, blah. And then, so he falls in love with this statue, this object. So when Aphrodite has her annual festival that they all go to, he goes and he makes his offering and he prays. It's funny you bring up prayer. And he asks her, he says, I love this statue. Could you make her a real person? And Aphrodite is so moved by this that when he goes home, his statue's gone and there's a woman standing there in her place. And it is this woman. And so he gets his wish to have love, But it's interesting because this is, as I tell my students, this is an object that's been turned into a subject. Like, you were this thing that I worshipped, now you're a real person, right? So how do we get to the real person if all the things that make us real people kind of get shut off, right? And I feel like it's the same things that drive, this saying life centers around this kind of acquisition of stuff and everything. Your relationship is just another one of those boxes you check. It's another thing that you acquire. And by the way, I'm not saying anybody's relationship here is like that, but socially speaking, it can feel like that. Like that's just another thing that you are supposed to do as a good member of society or whatever. And if you choose not to do that, now if women choose not to do that, that's just like, oh, you can't have that. Men choose not to do it, well, he's just living the life of the, rugged bachelor or whatever. When a woman does it, it's just kind of like, what's wrong with you? So, anyway, it's, It's interesting. Let's look at our reading for today. Center card, again, maturity card. This is coming around a lot, but this is an ace. You've got a couple of aces in this reading, so this has to do with what's new, right? This is new beginnings. So again, new way of thinking about the material, right? This is new way of thinking about materialism, thinking about what we value. Okay, new ways of thinking about it. And the inner feeling of which we're unaware. Now this is interesting. We have the postponement card. Now this is the Four of Swords. Now Four of Swords is typically a card of healing, right? Of taking time out to heal, taking time out to reflect or to physically recover from something. So unconsciously, this could be a healing process, but there's also could be this sense of postponement that we may be reluctant to move into a new beginning of some kind. This may be a space that, even if we say, yes, we see the problem with the old, the new, it'd be very refreshing to have something new. Because we don't, it does take some work to get there. So we might be inclined to go, well, maybe next month, like there's there's kind of a postponement. And also because it generally means I feel like we're like kind of at war with something inside of ourselves that wants to say, well, you can't possibly look at it that way. What about this? And what about that? And, yeah, you know what I mean? It's like it's like trying to, like what I was just saying about quitting my job and having to disabuse myself of the idea that I needed to be making a certain income in order to just be able to survive. It's a real sense of needing to unwrap mentally and also emotionally from a lot of these things. This can cause a lot of anxiety. But you also notice in this card, there's a woman here, and she's looking at this gray landscape, and what she's missing is the color in here. Okay, so it's like, are you only looking at what you think is going to be the bleak prospect, and are you seeing this other thing that's right there? It makes it almost like a Four of Cups kind of thing, right? But it's not. It's the Four of Swords here. And the external feeling of which we're aware is yet another. This is a new beginning, going with the flow, but it's also a new beginning emotionally. This is the Ace of Cups, right? So we're talking about new ways of looking at value, new ways of looking at love, new ways of opening up, but we right now might be focused more on what we might see as what's lacking there. Okay. And what are we being called to do? Here we go. Ordinariness. Once again. Just being ordinary. Now, being ordinary, that's interesting. I feel like, and I don't know if the rest of you have felt this way, but in the last week or so, I have gone through like this emotional roller coaster. I've had some days where I've literally been just out of nowhere. I just have like a profound sadness, or I have a profound, just profound feelings about things. And when you have something like that, it can almost throw you into a depression. Like, I can't move forward with this. But I mean, I've just said to myself, like, okay, well, you're feeling this. This is how you take the distance from it. I'm like, all right, well, this is there. I'm not going to try to stop feeling it. I'm not going to be like, no, let's do all these things to make me happy now. It's like, no, this is what I'm feeling. Sometimes, you write about it, or you make up a story about it. Yep, totally agree. It's been all over the map emotionally is what Alex is saying. Yeah, so you're trying to work that out. And I just found, I was like, all right, well, what's on the list for today? What's the normal stuff I have to do? I got to put the laundry away. I've got to, I got to grade papers. I've got to, it's just kind of like, all right, well, I'm just going to go one step at a time and be ordinary, right? Just do the ordinary stuff, because what I find is that just allowing myself to do that, then that emotional intensity eventually fades. I've been trying to fight it. It doesn't work, is what Alex is saying. Right. A lot of times we think about it, and that's another emotional thing too. Like if we call up our friends and we feel that way, our first thing is we want to be like, oh, here, let me do something to cheer you up, which is well meant. Absolutely. And maybe sometimes that is the thing. Maybe it's just something to make us look at things differently. But sometimes we just need to feel what that is. That's why when I deal with people who are going through things and they say, well, I'm trying not to feel that way. And I'm like, but it's okay to feel that way. Like that's part of your range of emotions. Like that's part of heart opening. That heart opening requires courage. And here's our outcome. Strength. The strength comes from just allowing us to be in that new space, and right now just being ordinary. Because I feel like the new things we're coming into are going to be more felt rather than analyzed. That's a message I've been getting a lot too, because when I have my angelic discourse with, when I talk with Azrael, when I have my messages and so forth, he's just saying, well, you are on a different track, you are doing something new, but go with what you feel. Don't be trying to analyze it too much. Okay, crazy, I got the strength card in my pull yesterday. Yes, and and remember, we did have a reading on that when we talked about Leo energy and stuff last week, maybe? That seems to be a theme right now. Now, interestingly, we are moving out of the strength year, which is card 8. And we're moving into the 9 year, which is the hermit. Like I said, like in terms of the numerology, 2024 adds up to 8, right? 2025 adds up to 9. And so, yeah, we're kind of being reminded that that's where our strength, and I feel like that's been one of the messages of this year. The strength actually comes from the heart, from opening the heart space. And that probably is the space that's probably the key to the integration that we're talking about, masculine and feminine integration. But again, women also, though. Women right now are just kind of sick of being second-class citizens, so women are getting very angry and closing their hearts down, too. And even though, again, the anger is understood, it's like you need to allow yourself to be angry about it without closing your heart. And that's what ends up happening, and I can say this from personal experience. That's what happens. You just close down and you're like, you know what? I'm not going to be bothered. And I think for a period of time that may even be appropriate. But at some point you kind of have to say, okay, now I'm punishing myself with isolation because of this, instead of saying like, okay, what's a new way that I can approach this? And at some point I think we need to, that's where we need to find our heart strength. It doesn't always have to mean that we have to be in a relationship. If people don't want to be in one, then they're not, nothing's obliging anybody to do that. But there's a lot of kind of backlash against this very patriarchal and capitalistic way of thinking that, everything is about, suppressing emotion, about suppressing things, about working your butt off to make money, and it's never going to be enough money. This whole thing, which I think there's a lot here that this new era is teaching us about getting back to being human. And that's one of the main things, is this heart opening and learning how to come into relationship with each other. Like you said, the Shiva Shakti thing, learning to bring that into balance. But also just, how do we need to do that? And there's not, like I said, there's not like a straightforward, 3-step, 5-step answer to that, 12-step program. There's no straightforward answer to that. It's going to be different for every person depending on what your own circumstances are, what kind of relationships you have. But I think one of the things that I think also says, I think it kind of starts with self-love too. And that's something that we're often not taught to do, because, loving yourself, well, that's narcissistic, that's selfish. It's like, no, we're not talking about narcissism. We're talking about just, if you feel good about yourself and you feel centered in yourself, then you're able to negotiate the people around you. But it takes quite a long time to get there, because, again, there's a whole lot about our culture that is actually quite dehumanizing in that way. And I think these are all little pieces that we're trying to figure out what the new thing's going to look like. And the new thing, the only one theme I'm definitely seeing right now is it is about love. We keep hearing about love. We keep hearing about heart opening, and we're kind of like, yeah, okay, well, what does that mean? So I don't know. Just some thoughts for today about where that conversation might be going. And also just mentioning that that's what ISFM is going to be working on next term. So. It'd be nice to see more guys involved in the ISFM as well too. I mean, we have a lot of women, which I think is awesome, but it would be good. I mean, I know Max teaches, but I think it's also like, kind of seeing where all of that's going to go. And hello and welcome. And I'm actually just about to sign off, so thank you for joining me. We're a little bit past time. So we were just talking about masculine feminine integration and what that might look like. Being that relationship seems to be a thing. So, so lots to think about. And of course, these recordings will be available as always. Thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope everybody has a great Friday, a great weekend. Happy solstice. I mean, I'll be on tomorrow morning, but, kind of in advance, if you're not on tomorrow, happy solstice. And, if you're in the Northeast, get ready for a cold weekend coming up. But yeah, I will see everybody tomorrow morning. So thanks. So you're welcome, Alex. Have a nice day, and I'll see you all soon. Take care.